A street girl helps a millionaire fix his car, but what he didn't know was that this girl kept a secret that would change his life forever. Imagine for a moment that fate had the cruelty to take away the love of your life without explanation, leaving you with questions that never found answers. Now imagine that years later, at the most unexpected moment, an unknown girl appears in front of you, wearing on her finger the ring that you yourself designed for that woman who disappeared from your life. This is the story of Michael, a successful businessman who thought he had buried his past, until a chance encounter on the streets of New York City confronted him with a truth as painful as it was revealing. A truth that involves conspiracies, betrayals, and a web of lies that kept a father separated from his daughter for 11 long years. But be careful, because nothing in this story is what it seems. Every answer we find will open 10 more questions. Every person we trust could be our worst enemy, and every moment of hope will be accompanied by a revelation that will break our hearts. Prepare your emotions, because what you're about to discover will take you from the deepest indignation to tears of the sweetest victory. This is a story about the power of true love, about justice that sometimes takes time but never fails, and about how destiny has mysterious ways of repairing what time and human evil have destroyed. The question that will haunt you from the first moment is simple but devastating. If you were Michael, how far would you be willing to go to recover what you never knew you had lost? That morning, the sun beat down hard on the hot concrete of downtown Brooklyn. The air smelled of gasoline, hot dogs, and that desperation that only those who struggle day by day on the streets of New York City know. Michael Herrera was driving his black Mercedes through a route he normally avoided, but traffic on the FDR Drive had forced him to take these streets. He had just left Woodlawn Cemetery, where, like every Sunday, he left flowers on his wife's grave. It was an empty ritual, but it calmed him. The engine started making a strange noise. Then, the smoke. "Damn it," he muttered, pulling over in front of a hot dog stand. The hood was smoking like a grill. He got out of the car, checking the engine with the frustration of someone who's not used to things failing. The Italian shoes he wore cost more than many families in this neighborhood earned in a month. Among the bustle of street vendors and constant honking, a clear voice reached him. "Your car broke down, right?" He turned. It was a skinny girl, about 11 years old, with messy hair and barefoot. She carried a cardboard box full of gum and candy. Her clothes were clean but patched, and she had those lively eyes of someone who had learned to survive from a young age. "Looks like the engine overheated," the girl continued without shame. "I can help you if you want. My buddy Chuck has a shop right around here." Michael looked at her surprised. He wasn't used to a street kid talking to him so directly. "You know about cars?" he asked, half joking. "More or less," she replied with a smile that showed crooked but sincere teeth. "Sometimes I help Mr. Chuck. It's the radiator hose. It's loose, that's why it leaked water." While she checked the engine with surprising knowledge, Michael noticed something that made him stop cold. When the girl raised her hand to wipe sweat from her forehead, he saw a small ring, golden, with a little blue stone in the center. A very particular design, impossible to confuse. "Where did you get that ring?" he suddenly asked, with a strange tone. The girl lowered her hand as if suddenly afraid. "I've always had it. My mom left it to me." Michael's heart began to beat like a drum. He had ordered that ring made himself more than 12 years ago at a jewelry store in Soho. A unique design, with an inscription inside that only he and one other person knew. "What was your mom's name?" he insisted, trying to sound calm but with a broken voice. The girl hesitated. Sometimes she changed her mom's name when strangers asked, but something in this man's look told her she could tell the truth. Sarah Rodriguez. Michael felt like the floor was being ripped out from under his feet. It couldn't be a coincidence. It couldn't be just a similar ring, not after all these years of wondering what had happened to her. "Do you have a picture of her?" he asked with a half-broken voice. The girl reached into her box and pulled out an old photo folded at the corners. It was a woman smiling, long hair, big eyes, moon-shaped mouth. It was her. Michael recognized her immediately. Sarah, the woman who broke his heart without warning so many years ago, the one who disappeared one day, leaving only a note that said, "I'm sorry, but I can't stay." "What's your name, girl?" "Hope. And you?" "Michael." His hands trembled as he held the photo. "Hope, your mom, she's not with you anymore?" "No, sir. She died when I was 8 years old. She was very sick." Michael closed his eyes. Sarah had died, and he didn't find out. He couldn't say goodbye. He couldn't tell her he had looked for her. He couldn't know why she left. "Who do you live with now?" "With Mrs. Dorothy. She's taken care of me since my mum got sick." "Is Dorothy your family?" "No, but she says I belong to her now." That last word, belong, hit him like a bucket of cold water. No child belongs to anyone that way. "Hope, did your mom ever talk to you about someone named Michael?" The girl looked at him surprised. "Yeah. Sometimes she said she knew a Michael who was very good, that if she ever found him, maybe things would be different." Traffic kept flowing, but for Michael the world had stopped. Michael hadn't been able to sleep for 3 days. Hope's words echoed in his head like an echo in an empty cathedral. He had kept her cell phone number and given her enough money so she wouldn't have to sell gum for a week, but that didn't calm the storm in his chest. That morning, from his office in Midtown, he called Robert Sanchez, the best private investigator he knew, a former NYPD detective who now dedicated himself to solving cases that the authorities couldn't or wouldn't touch. "I need you to find information about a woman, Sarah Rodriguez Lopez. She died a few years ago, but I don't know when or where." 3 hours later, Robert called him back. "Boss, I found the hospital where Sarah died. Bellevue Hospital. But this is really weird." They met at a coffee shop in Greenwich Village that same afternoon. Robert brought a thick folder with photocopied documents. "Sarah died 5 years ago at Bellevue," Robert began, opening the folder. "She was hospitalized for 3 weeks before passing away. And nobody told me. Wasn't there any emergency contact? Here's the strange part. In her file there's a note signed by someone named Dorothy Miller. It says verbatim, 'The patient does not wish for any family, ex-partners or acquaintances to be contacted for her emotional peace.'" Michael frowned. "That doesn't sound like Sarah. She never—" "Wait, there's more. I talked to a nurse who still works there. She told me Sarah arrived in really bad shape, malnourished, with symptoms of advanced tuberculosis. But what struck her most was that an older woman came to visit her every day." "Dorothy." "Exactly. And according to the nurse, it didn't seem like a loving visit. More like she was watching her. Sarah would get nervous when she arrived." Michael felt his throat closing up. And what happened to Hope? That's the problem. When Sarah died, this Dorothy showed up with a document supposedly signed by Sarah, giving her custody of the girl. The hospital washed their hands of it and handed her over. Without verifying anything? Nothing. A girl with no birth certificate, no social security number, no papers, perfect for disappearing in the system. Robert closed the folder and looked directly at Michael. "Boss, this wasn't a coincidence. Someone intentionally kept Sarah isolated. The question is, why would this Dorothy do something like that?" The next day, Robert had more information. They met at the same place, but this time the investigator brought photographs and a more somber expression. "I found Dorothy Miller," he said, putting a photo in front of him. 62 years old, lives in East New York, and Michael, this is uglier than we thought." The photo showed a heavy-set woman with short grey hair and a hard look. Michael vaguely recognized her from the neighborhood where he had found Hope. "Dorothy has a record for using minors for economic purposes," Robert continued. "In other words, she puts kids to work on the streets. Window washers, vendors, begging for money. She's never been caught in anything big because she knows how to move around the authorities." "And how did Sarah end up with her?" "Here's the part that's going to hurt you. Sarah lost her job at a music store up in Williamsburg. She ended up living in an irregular shelter where Dorothy recruited vulnerable people, mainly single women with children. Michael clenched his fists. Sarah, the woman he had loved with all his heart, had ended up in extreme poverty while he dined at luxury restaurants. According to the testimonies I gathered, Sarah tried several times to get out of there. She wanted to look for work, wanted to contact someone from her past. But Dorothy controlled her. How? She took away her cell phone. She told her she had no future, that nobody would help her. And when Sarah mentioned your name, Dorothy told her you were already married, that you had another life. The irony was cruel. Michael had gotten married, but it had been a loveless marriage for social convenience. His wife had died the previous year without him feeling the pain that now tore him apart over Sarah. There are witnesses who swear that Dorothy watched her constantly, and when Sarah got sick, instead of taking her to the doctor, she kept her locked up until she couldn't breathe anymore. Why would she do that? Robert looked at him seriously. Because she wanted to keep hope. A girl without papers is perfect for this type of exploitation. Nobody asks, nobody searches. But there's something else, Michael. I found a woman who lived in the same shelter. She told me that Sarah, before dying, confessed something about hope to her. What? That this girl was all she had left of the only person she had ever truly loved. Michael didn't want to wait anymore. With all the information Robert had gathered, he headed directly to the tenement where Dorothy lived. It was mid-afternoon when he parked his Mercedes in front of the rusty gate in East New York. He knocked on the door firmly. From the other side came a hoarse voice he already knew. "Who the hell is knocking like that?" Dorothy peeked through the bars, with a cigarette hanging from her lips. When she saw him, her expression changed. She recognized him immediately. "Ah, the rich guy again. What are you doing around here? Did you forget where you live?" "I came for the girl," Michael said without beating around the bush. Dorothy let out a dry, unpleasant laugh. "Which girl? There's no girl of yours here." "Hope." "Ah, Hope," she said with fake mockery. "And since when is she yours?" "Since Sarah left her to me, since I found out everything you did to her." Dorothy threw the cigarette on the ground and stepped on it calmly. "Look, fancy man, I don't know what stories they told you, but that kid doesn't have a dad or mom. Sarah left her abandoned, like everyone in this place. I was the only one who picked her up. Did you use her to work on the streets? And what do you know about struggling? About taking care of hungry kids? You just come because guilt got to you, right? You're old now. You're bored in your big house, and you think with a girl you can fix your conscience." At that moment, Hope appeared from the back of the yard. She carried the same box of candy in her hands, and a surprised expression when she saw Michael. "Mr. Michael!" she shouted, but her voice sounded more scared than happy. "Don't move from there," Dorothy ordered without turning to look at her. "Hope," Michael said, raising his voice, "you decide. Nobody's going to force you. But if you stay, you're going to keep living in fear. And if you come with me, we're going to fight for you, for your papers, for your life. I promise you." Dorothy turned around furious. "Don't fill her head with dreams. You have no idea who you are. That girl isn't even yours." Hope looked at Dorothy, then at Michael. Then slowly she began walking toward the gate. "I told you not to move," Dorothy yelled. But Hope didn't stop. She opened the gate and came out, standing next to Michael. "Are you really going to help me?" she asked quietly. Michael knelt down and put his hand on her shoulder. "Really?" 3 days had passed since Hope arrived at Michael's house in the Upper East Side. The girl was adapting slowly, although she still slept with the light on and asked every morning if she had to leave. Michael did everything possible to make her feel safe, but he knew the legal battle was just beginning. That morning, Robert called him urgently. "Boss, I found something that changes everything. You need to come see this right now." An hour later, they were in the investigator's office. Robert had a wrinkled letter on his desk, sealed in a yellowed envelope. "Remember the nurse from Bellevue? She called me last night. She said she had been keeping this since Sarah died, but was afraid to turn it in, until she saw on the news what happened with Dorothy." Michael took the letter with trembling hands. On the envelope, in Sarah's unmistakable handwriting, was written, For Michael, if this ever reaches your hands. He opened it carefully and began to read. Michael, I don't know if this letter will ever reach you. Maybe they'll burn it. Maybe they'll throw it away. But I need to write to you, even if just to feel like you're listening to me. I know I left without telling you anything. I know I disappeared, not because I didn't love you, but because I was afraid of being in your way. You were already married when I found out I was pregnant. Hope is your daughter, Michael. I knew it from the moment she was born. She has your eyes, your way of smiling when she's concentrating. I tried to find you so many times, but Dorothy controlled me. She took away my cell phone, told me you already had another family, that we didn't matter to you. I'm dying, Michael. And not from the disease, but from knowing that our daughter is going to stay with this woman who only sees her as a way to make money. I'm leaving you this letter with the hope that someday, somehow, it will reach you. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. Please, find her. Protect her. She deserves a better life than I could give her. And you were always better than I knew how to take care of. With eternal love, Sarah, P.S. The ring I gave her is the one you gave me. It was the only thing I had left of us. Michael couldn't finish reading. Tears clouded his vision, and the paper trembled in his hands. Robert, he said with a broken voice, Hope is my daughter. I knew it. Nobody fights like that for a stranger. But then, why is Dorothy so sure she can beat me? What else is she hiding? Michael had decided he needed legal help to formalize Hope's custody. Through an acquaintance from the country club, he contacted Edward Vasquez, a lawyer specializing in family law with offices in Manhattan. Edward was an elegant man, about 45 years old, always impeccably dressed. His office was full of diplomas and awards. When Michael explained the situation, Edward showed great interest and confidence. Mr. Michael, this is simpler than it seems. With Sarah's letter and the testimonies you have, we can secure custody in a few weeks. For 5 days, Edward worked on the documents. He requested a DNA test to strengthen the case, which seemed logical to Michael. Everything seemed to be going well. Until the summons arrived. Michael was in his office when he received the envelope from the court. He opened it expecting a date for the custody hearing. Instead, he read something that left him frozen. Lawsuit for illegal possession of a minor. Plaintiff, Edward Vasquez, representing Dorothy Miller. He immediately called Edward's cell phone. It rang several times before he answered. Edward, what the hell is this? Michael, we need to talk. We're already talking. Why is there a lawsuit with your name on it? It's complicated. Come to my office. An hour later, Michael was facing Edward, who no longer showed the friendly smile from before. The DNA test came back negative, Michael. What? There's no biological relationship between you and the girl. I'm sorry. Michael was speechless. It was impossible. Sarah's letter was clear. This has to be wrong. I need another test. No, Michael, what you need is to understand that you're obsessing over a fantasy. That girl isn't yours. And then why are you representing Dorothy? Edward sighed. Because someone has to protect that minor from a man who is clearly disturbed. Your behavior is concerning. My behavior? You're my lawyer. I was your lawyer. But my ethical responsibility is with the truth and with that girl's well-being. Michael stood up furious. Edward, what did they do to you? How much did they pay you? Nobody paid me anything. I simply open my eyes when necessary. This isn't going to end here. Michael, you have 48 hours to turn the minor over to Child Protective Services. If you don't, you'll face kidnapping charges. Michael knew something didn't add up. Edward's betrayal was too sudden, too coordinated. After consulting with Robert, they decided to set a trap. The next day, Michael called Edward. I want to talk to you before turning Hope over. We can avoid this becoming a scandal. They met at the Four Seasons restaurant. Michael arrived with a small recording device that Robert had given him, connected to his cell phone. Edward appeared confident, even smiling. I'm glad you've come to your senses, Michael. Come to my senses. Edward, we worked together on several cases. I considered you a friend. And I considered you one too. That's why I want this to end well for everyone. For everyone? Or for you and Dorothy? Edward took a sip of his whiskey. Look, Michael, in this business you learn that friendship and business are different things. So this is business. Everything is business. You know that better than anyone. Michael leaned forward. Edward, how long have you been planning this? Planning what? I didn't plan for you to become obsessed with a girl who isn't yours. But you did plan to destroy me, didn't you? Edward smiled sideways. Michael, you were always too naive for big business. When you lose this case, when your reputation is ruined, you're going to have to sell your company very cheap. And guess who's going to be ready to buy it? Edward's smile widened. Let's say I have interested investors. Son of a bitch, this was always about the company. Not just that. Also because I got tired of seeing you as the successful businessman while I worked for you like just another employee. It was my turn to be the boss. And Dorothy, is she also part of your plan? Dorothy and I understand each other. She needed legal protection. I needed you to fall. Fair exchange. Do you know that woman exploits children? I know she's a woman who survives as she can in a screwed-up country. Not all of us can be born with fortune, Michael. Michael clenched his fists under the table. Edward, you just confessed everything I needed to know. Confessed what? A conversation between friends. Michael smiled for the first time. A recorded conversation between a con man and his victim. Edward's face completely changed. The family court in Lower Manhattan was packed that morning. Michael arrived with Hope holding his hand, and his new lawyer, Ralph Mendoza, an honest litigator recommended by Robert. On the other side were Edward and Dorothy. Edward maintained his professional pose, but Dorothy looked nervous, sweating despite the air conditioning. Judge Martinez, a serious man of about 60 years old, entered, and everyone stood up. Gentlemen, this case involves the welfare of a minor, so I want facts, not theater. Edward was the first to speak. Your Honor, Mr. Michael Herrera has no legal connection to the minor. The DNA test is negative, and now we know he's obsessed with a fantasy. Do you have that test? Asked the judge. Yes, Your Honor. Edward handed over the document. Ralph stood up. Your Honor, we have evidence that this test was manipulated. Here is a recording where attorney Edward Vasquez admits to having conspired against my client. A recording? Yes, Your Honor. Edward's voice filled the room. When you lose this case, you're going to have to sell your company very cheap. It was my turn to be the boss. Dorothy and I understand each other. The silence was total. Edward was pale. Anything to say, Attorney Vasquez? Asked the judge harshly. That recording is illegal, Your Honor. But it's not false. Did you confirm having conspired against your own client? Edward didn't respond. Ralph continued. Furthermore, we have the original letter from Sarah Rodriguez, the minor's mother, confirming Mr. Herrera's paternity. We also have the testimony of the nurse who attended Mrs. Rodriguez before she died. Where is this nurse? Here, Your Honor. A woman of about 50 years stood up from the audience. Sarah Rodriguez gave me that letter before dying. She asked me that if anything happened to her, to get it to Michael Herrera. Dorothy Miller kept her isolated, wouldn't let her talk to anyone. Dorothy exploded. That's a lie! I took care of her when nobody else wanted to. Did you take care of her or control her? Asked the judge. I took care of her, and that little girl too. Mrs. Miller, I have here a file with your record for exploitation of minors. Did Hope work for you? Dorothy remained silent. The judge closed his folder. I've heard enough. Edward Vasquez, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice. Dorothy Miller for exploitation of minors. Custody of Hope is granted to Michael Herrera. Michael hugged Hope, who cried with relief. 2 weeks later, Michael's house on the Upper East Side had completely changed. The hallways now echoed with laughter and light footsteps. Hope had started school, and every afternoon came home telling stories about her new friends. That night, while they ate grilled cheese sandwiches that Michael had learned to make, although they came out a bit burnt, Hope looked at him with those eyes that no longer showed fear. "Dad, Michael, can I ask you something?" "Of course, my love. Can I just call you Dad?" Michael felt his heart soften. "Of course you can, daughter. And they really can't take me away anymore. Really, never again." Hope smiled and kept eating. On the table were drawings she had made at school, a house with two figures holding hands under a yellow sun. That same night, when Hope was already asleep, the mailman arrived with an envelope with no return address. Michael opened it curiously. "Mr. Herrera, I don't know if I should write this, but I can't bear the wait any more. I work at the lab where the first DNA test was done. A man paid me to change the results and make them negative. He threatened me if I didn't do it. When I saw on the news everything that happened, I understood that I had separated a father from his daughter. I have no way to prove this to you, but the first test was false. Hope is your biological daughter. I just wanted you to know the truth." A repentant technician. Michael went up to Hope's room. He found her sleeping, hugging the teddy bear he had given her. He sat on the edge of the bed and stroked her hair. "My girl," he whispered to her, "it doesn't matter what tests or papers say. You're my daughter because we both decided it, because your mom connected us, because love doesn't need certificates." He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years felt complete. The next day, Hope woke up early and ran to the kitchen where Michael was preparing breakfast. "Good morning, Dad." "Good morning, my love. Did you sleep well?" "Yes. I dreamed about my mom, Sarah. She told me she was happy because I'm not alone anymore." Michael hugged her tight. "You'll never be alone again, Hope. I promise you." And in that promise, sealed with tears of happiness, a new story began. One where true love always finds a way to triumph.